Welcome to Presents with Cindy Urrutia, PhD, the go-to podcast to listen, learn, grow, and create greater levels of presence in your professional and personal life. I'm your host, Cindy. Today, I'm very excited and thrilled to be joined by Phung Huynh, who is a working artist in Los Angeles, an educator. Her practice involves drawing, painting, public art, community engagement, and it's predominantly informed by her experience as a refugee. And as a result, she does projects that explore the complexities of displacement, assimilation, cultural negotiation, among other things that we find with Cambodians and Vietnamese refugees in the United States. She is also an educator and assistant professor at California State University. She has received multiple fellowships and commissions with the city of Los Angeles and is exhibited nationally and internationally. The list can go on and on and on. Phung, welcome.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for saying yes. I'd like to start off with asking you if you can share with us a little bit about your experience as a Southeast Asian refugee and how that has shaped your worldviews.
Thank you for that question, Cindy. It's a complicated one because I came to the United States when I was just under 2 years old, not even two yet. So revisiting the experience of being a refugee is through the lens of my parents and their stories, because I can't recall memories of my own. So as you know, my father is Cambodian and survived the genocide and civil war of the 1970s and escaped to Vietnam, where he met my mom. And my mom is of Chinese ancestry, born in Vietnam, and that's where I was born. In 1978, we literally fled the country. My father pretended to be a fisherman and packed our entire family, extended families, cousins, grandparents, aunties, uncles, under the boat's deck and escaped to Thailand. We eventually resettled in the United States. And when we did, it was not easy because we resettled in a very small town in Michigan. We were the only Southeast Asian family. In fact, there was a newspaper article written about my younger sister because she was the first Asian ever born in that hospital. Although we were very fortunate and, grateful for the families that sponsored us, now my godparents, Karen and Dave Jorgensen, becoming American was very difficult. That means assimilating. That means what I looked like and sounded like, and our food was othered and looked down upon. And so I think that experience of assimilating as a refugee informs my practice in being an educator, an artist, and a mother.
Wow. And that is difficult on the one hand to be living a cultural heritage based on how your parents are raising you, but also assimilating and acclimating to a new culture while having an oral history being passed down of what it was like before the war, after the war, and being a refugee. So those are many things that you were negotiating, and I believe you still continue to negotiate.
Still do. Absolutely. Still do.
If I may ask you, when was it that you said, aha, not only do I want to be an artist, but my practice is going to be informed by who I am versus I want to be an artist and I want to fit in with mainstream culture by doing the type of art that has depth, but a different type of depth that mostly focuses on the traditional mainstream culture experience versus the refugee experience?
That's such a good question. And that aha moment didn't happen just once, but several times.
Right.
It's such a complicated, layered experience. I remember always loving to draw. And
Mm.
I remember the first thing I loved to draw was anime characters. I love Japanese inspired cartoons with like these large, large bubbly eyes. And I was very discouraged to be an artist because as refugee parents, my parents want to make sure I could earn a living. So I was very discouraged. Like, you can do this for fun, but it's definitely not a career. It was later that I just like realized that me drawing these quote unquote Asian characters with big, big eyes was about assimilating. We should all have big eyes, you know?
Mm.
And then when I went to college, I went to Art Center, went to USC, went to these institutions in the United States where I guess to be an artist, I have to earn a degree and learn this thing called art. Almost all of my professors were white male. And so a lot of the art that was introduced with me was very Eurocentric.
Mm.
And so we had figure drawing or figure painting. It was not questioned when we were drawing white models. And I would paint white models. But then when I saw my friend who was an international student from Taiwan started to make, Chinese narratives and figurative works, I'm like, well, I want to try that too. And I started making artworks about Chinese feet binding. Remember my grandmother talking about her mom with her feet being bound. And anytime I decided to make work about people who looked like me, then my peers, most of them non-Asian, and professors would be like, why are you making this kind of work? It's very introspective. People won't understand it. It's just so much about, just Asian people. They didn't say it in those specific words, but that's what they were saying to me.
So in essence, it's like you were being dismissed.
Right. And that I was making work that was not relatable, was not
Mm.
relevant, and that was only for my community. But yet I had to accept Renaissance art and Dutch art and Baroque art, right, as the norm. That's art, but it's not the same the other way around.
I can only imagine how difficult that must have been because you're trying to, I want to say, come of age and understand who you are. So, since you're a young woman
Mhm.
at university and the people you look up to, your professors, your mentors, your educators are telling you no. How did you find a way to say no back?
At first, it was demoralizing because there's already this hierarchy, right? Like you have this professor telling a student that your work is not validated. And when
Mm.
you're stratified in that positioned relationship, you're just going to accept it. But I was lucky that I found certain professors like Lawrence Chua in grad school and NYU, who was part German and part Malaysian Chinese, told me to read Orientalism by Edward Said,
Oh, right. That's a
right?
great book.
It's a great book. It was published in 1978, the year my family came to the United States. It was about the othering and the dehumanizing of Asian people, including West Asian, in the European imagination. It just really solidified everything for me. And then I started making work about, beauty standards and questioning plastic surgery and how it amplifies Western beauty standards and erases Asian identity. And then I went into making work, about the Southeast Asian refugee experience and all of that. I mean, once I started, I couldn't stop.
Mhm.
Or I didn't get to share this with you, Cindy, but when I went to grad school at NYU, I was an illustrator. I was a freelance editorial illustrator to pay for school. So I would do illustrations for hip hop magazines, American Airlines, different magazines. I had a rep, an illustration representative who would help me get these jobs. And he would ask me for artwork to promote my work. Every time I gave him anything with Latinx figures and characters or Asians or anything not white, he'd be like, you need to stop making ethnic people. You're not going to get jobs. You keep making artwork about ethnic people. And I was done. I'm like, you know what? I want to make art I want to make.
That was very brave. I think that especially if you're coming of age at the time that you were coming of age, that was difficult. We are now living in a society where we talk about identity politics, where we are talking about the importance of diversity, of equity, of inclusion, of accessibility. Those conversations were not happening 25 years ago. And there's a certain bravery that comes with saying, I'm going to listen to my inner voice, to my spirit, and continue to move forward. When did you know you were on the right path, even though you had such demoralizing moments?
I didn't have any definitive moment. And I would have to say, even though you beautifully described as me like just staying true to this path, it wasn't always with 100% confidence.
Mm.
There was always doubt.
Can I interject for a second? I think that's something so humane and powerful you said, that there's doubt. We all doubt ourselves. And it's important to remember that when we are leaders or rising leaders or new to the workplace, is that doubt happens. It's normal, but it's also important to stay true to yourself, even when there is doubt. And even after you have years of experience,
Yeah.
there's still doubt. But what defines us is that we continue to move forward, even when there's doubt.
Right. And if it's something right, I feel like all the things we're talking about, I think what's rooted in our practice and not just art, but just being civically engaged and socially engaged is to see where people are wronged.
Mhm. To be a leader, to find a solution. I think there's something very powerful that doesn't always get talked about because it's not always seen, is that those of us that came from a certain generation, you can call us Generation X, at least I'm part of it.
Yes, same.
We didn't always have mentors, especially if we are somebody of color or ethnic. We didn't always have somebody rooting us. We had to find it within us and move forward even when we question ourselves. But the beauty now is that conversations are changing. There's still a lot of work to do, but people are starting to be more open. And that gives us an opportunity to be leaders and mentors for the next generation in a way that we were not able to have.
I think that's true, Cindy, but I also think that it's the society that centers on whiteness and patriarchy that doesn't help us recognize that we always have had mentors who looked like us and sounded like us.
Mm,
Like in the institution, I didn't have a mentor who was a person of color, but I did through my grandmothers who taught me how to sew. I
mm.
did through my high school mentor who was a Black artist from New York and drafted in the Vietnam War and lovingly taught me about Black history and artists of color.
Ugh.
I feel very lucky that I had that. And it's little moments like that. I even remember my preschool teacher was actually a Black male. How rare is it for anybody to have a Black male teacher?
Mhm.
And that
Yes.
coincided with the late 70s and early 80s when we were watching Reading Rainbow. Do you remember Reading Rainbow?
Yes.
Right? I forget his name, the actor.
I don't remember
He
either.
was in The Roots and Star Trek. I have to look it up because it's going to drive me crazy. But little moments like that, when we do have people of color, we
Yes.
we grab onto that. And now, even being an educator, I have taught in predominantly minoritized serving institutions where faculty members are mostly white, but students are mostly people of color. And so when they see me, they're like, wait, we give it to like, hey, we know.
Yeah.
Uh,
And if I may ask you, Fang, what made you want to be an educator?
um, before I forget, let's go back to Reading Rainbow.
Let's go back to the okay, let's do
LeVar
that.
Burton. That's LeVar Burton.
Yes.
LeVar Burton. LeVar Burton and Mr. Rogers, watching them on television. That's how I learned how to speak English, love reading, and love education. And then when I went to school, I remember feeling heard and safe. And I've always loved to learn. And I always remembered I want to do that for someone someday. So I always knew I wanted to be a teacher first before I wanted to be an artist, actually.
So you became an artist and then a teacher.
Yeah.
That's just life working itself the way it's meant to be because that's what you always wanted. I do remember a couple of years ago, we were having a conversation around teaching young students who are minorities, who are underserved. And you mentioned to me that you felt a responsibility, do the best that you can to support them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And for me, the support is creating a safe space for them so that they know they walk in feeling welcomed and that they belong. I always show up to class like an hour early and set up so that everything is clean, everything's ready. I want them to look forward to class. I usually play like ambient, relaxing music.
Mm,
I give them some time to just settle in the space. I think that part is very important. I always know their names. I commit that by the second week of class, I know every single one of my students' name and pronounce it correctly.
that's important.
That's so important. I tell them, don't give me your Starbucks name. Give me your real name.
It does make people feel seen and heard when you do something so simple as remember their names.
Yeah. And I become a better teacher because of them, because I try to listen and
Mhm.
I've made mistakes. I
We
make
all
mistakes.
have.
Yeah. And to correct those mistakes and to give them the opportunity to fully express themselves. For
Yes.
me, I feel like teacher also is there to support and guide and help the student create a path to end up where they want to be. And in doing that, sometimes as teacher, you're like, that's not where you should go. Maybe you want to go this way. An example of that is, Cindy, I remember I teach a figure drawing class, and I always come up with an exercise on the first day of class to compare and show them that when you have the model in front of you, you can draw the model. But when you try to imagine the model, it's going to be disproportional. So I always start with this exercise and I have them imagine a nude model, adult figure in their head and draw it. Then I said, put that drawing away. Here's a model, draw the model. And what I notice is when they draw the model from imagination in a classroom where it's majority students of color, it's always a white male.
Mm.
And then I would ask them, describe this model you imagined. How old is this model? What is their ethnic racial background? What body type it is? And we dissect it together and realize how kind of messed up that is, that it's normalized, that we don't see ourselves in the work that we create.
Oh, yes. Yes. You just reminded me when I first started teaching at the university level many, many years ago, I was the only person of color in the department. And the first day that I walked into class, nobody thought that I was actually the professor or the teacher. They thought I was perhaps a little bit of an older student. They weren't quite sure what I was until I went to the front of the room and I introduced myself. And at first, there were some interesting stares. This was quite some time ago. Things have changed. But I remember something that really moved me at the end of the term. Some of my students came up to me and they said, Miss, we want you to take us to see the places you've taught us.
Wow.
We'll do a car wash. We'll find a way to pay for your ticket. And I was so humbled in that moment because some of the students in that class came from disadvantaged backgrounds and could not easily afford a plane ticket to go abroad, much less pay for my plane ticket and housing. But yet there was this hunger in them because they were exposed to something different. It was a required core class that they had to take, and they learned to appreciate it in a new way. And they were willing to say, I want to go and see it in person for myself. And I'm going to figure out a way to pay for this. That to me was huge because I don't know if I would have been that proactive when I was a student, but these students were, and they wanted to see the different places and spaces we talked about. And I used to try to round out things as much as possible. I would teach the traditional European canon, but we would also have, non-canon art, looking at items from South America, from Asia, and India. I tried to do things as well-rounded as possible, and it impacted our students. And I think that when you're a teacher, when you see them take the initiative for something that big, it's very humbling. And it teaches us the power that we have should really be looked at as not just power, but a responsibility to be the best stewards that we can when we're teaching, and to
Yeah.
do it from the heart space, not just to teach for the heck of it. Because one way or another, we impact students, right? Whether it's somebody thinking that they should draw a white male because that's what they've been taught, or whether it's somebody thinking students from other colleges or universities get to travel overseas and look at art in person. Why not me? It's humbling to see how much a student can flourish and that we are a steward for that.
Thanks for sharing that. I love that. I think what's so powerful about that moment is that they knew they deserved to see that, and they were going to make it happen.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think that takes me to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is the heart. You bring your heart and soul to your practice and also to teaching. Why is that important to you? Why is it important to lead with your heart? And by lead, I'm talking about teaching with your heart, doing your art practice with your heart.
As I mentioned, Cindy, I just remember how I felt, not how I thought, right? But how I felt when my teachers made me feel empowered and have agency. And I've always wanted to do that too. But that's also complemented with my parents' critique of education in the United States because they grew up in Southeast Asia.
Mhm.
And I think you would relate to this too. That teachers in Southeast Asia and non-European, non-colonized teachers are not just your teachers, they're your family members.
Mhm.
It's not transactional. They're not there to teach you a skill or a lesson. They're there to ensure you become the best person you can be from somebody who shares community space with you.
Mhm.
Classroom is treated like a family space. And so I do that too. When I'm in the classroom and I'm acknowledging you, or I'm giving you the side eye because you're late, or asking you, why did you forget your pencil when you're taking an art class and it's the 15th week of the semester? That it comes out of love, not coming out of criticism, out of judgment, out of belittling you. It's coming because I want the best for you. I love that you say from the heart because I'm a Buddhist practitioner. And for me, when I think of teaching from the heart, it's with compassion and empathy. And from the Buddhist practice, it's about sharing suffering with others.
Mhm.
So when my student is not quote unquote performing at a certain level, I have to take a step back sometimes and think, why? What did my student go through that didn't allow them to come on time or miss so much of class? I'm trying, it's not always perfect at it, but I'm trying to teach from that place.
That's a beautiful place of not just teaching, but leadership
Mhm.
and how we show up, because ultimately, as human beings, we all share one thing in common, even if we come from different backgrounds. We want to belong.
Mhm.
We want to have a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And when there's a space where we feel that we belong because your teacher cares, because your teacher reminds you to bring your pencil, because your teacher is telling you, yes, you can represent yourself and you can believe in yourself. That's not only coming from the heart space, but that's expressing leadership and creating the next generation of leaders by example. You matter. We all matter. How do we grow together? And that's powerful. That's so, so powerful. And I think it doesn't matter what industry you are in. It doesn't matter if you're in education, if you're in technology, if you're in finance. If you can forge relationships of belonging and connection, you're showing up and you're creating the space for people to show up as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I may ask you another question. Based on your experience, is there any advice that you can give to a rising leader, artist, student, someone who's coming of age and is wondering, what do I do now? I just graduated.
Well, I would say pause and listen.
Mm.
I think the leader is not always the one who's in the forefront, always the one talking, always at the center. A good leader knows when to step back and let other people shine and to listen. And for the student just graduating or for somebody taking on a new job or embarking on something new, I would say just stop and listen first. Enter the space, not with, I know what to do, let me take over. Respect the space you're entering because there have been generations that have preceded you. Acknowledge it, observe it, and listen and absorb, and then understand where you fit into the space that you're entering.
Mm.
I would say that.
Yes, absolutely. And I fully agree with you. I thank you for sharing so much wisdom with us. And I do want to let our listeners know that Phung, who, yes, is an incredible educator and loves her students and her work, is an equally incredible artist. And I highly recommend that you learn more about her work. Phung, where can somebody go to read about your work, see your art pieces, get in touch with you if they're interested in purchasing something?
You can go to my Instagram. I have to keep up with young folks in their social media. And my Instagram is at Function, which is PHUNGXION. I also have a website, which is just my first and last name, www.phunghuynh.com. I have tons of public art out there and I love free stuff, for people. So you can take the metro or go to the LA County USC Medical Center. I have a lot of public art in LA County. And I'm very fortunate to have Luis de Jesus Gallery represent my work. He's a great person to contact, if there's any collectors out there who want to add to their roster.
Thank you. And one more thing, you currently have an exhibition at Pepperdine University.
I have two exhibitions up, actually.
Two. Okay, pardon me. Two exhibitions.
So the one at Pepperdine University will be up till September 8th.
And that one's titled Fun When Donut Hole, correct?
Yes. Yes.
That's a very interesting body of work. I remember when you first started doing it, and I started to see you draw people's face and likeness into donut boxes. I thought that was just so brilliant and witty, but I don't want to give too much away. I highly encourage you to check out this exhibition at Pepperdine University. And where's the second one?
The second one is at the Venda Museum in Culver City, and it's a group exhibition of Vietnamese artists, and it's called Vietnam in Transition.
Okay, wonderful. Well, there you have it. You heard it. You know where to go to learn more about Phung. Phung, it's been an absolute honor and pleasure. Thank you so much. And I am looking forward to having you back on Presence.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Presence. For more information on how you can create greater levels of impactful presence in your professional and personal life, visit www.cindyurrutia.com and follow me on social media. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Feel free to post a comment and we'll read it on the show.